Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Appreciate you joining me here for another week on the podcast. Before I get into today's episode, as always, I've got a few favors to ask. Please make sure you're subscribed on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you give us a follow on there as well. And while you're there on the podcast platforms, please make sure that you leave us a 5-star review and share it around with anybody who you think might get some value out of what it is that we are doing here. By you doing that, it enables the podcast to be able to get out to more people who can hopefully find some value out of the content that I am putting out here on a weekly basis. So once again, thank you all for listening, and thank you all for taking the time out of your busy weeks to listen along to what I've got going on here. I appreciate all the support, all the feedback, and all the love that I get from everybody who listens to this, and the growth that you have helped this podcast see over the last 2 years. This week is it's a bit of a reminder podcast. It's a reminder podcast to let you know, let myself know as well, anybody who's listening, that thing you've been avoiding, you probably need to go and do that. And the reason I speak about this is there's a lot of conversations that I'm having with people at the moment, whether it be talking from my own behalf, or I'm talking to a client, or even conversations I'm having with friends, where we all want things to be easy. And there's going to be times in life where maybe you need to take the easier options. But when we really drill down to something we want to change, or something that's maybe not quite right in our lives, I think we can all look at those situations and see that there is generally something that we are avoiding doing. Whether it be an action, whether it be a conversation, whether it be a habit that we need to implement, or it's just something that we need to do. A lot of times, if we're feeling stuck and we're feeling like we're not able to move things forward, there'll be something that we're avoiding doing because it feels uncomfortable. It feels like we just shy away from it. Sometimes it can get to a point where it actually makes us feel physically sick, or it makes us feel, we get this visceral response around that action that we just don't want to do it. And the reminder is, a lot of the time, we need to look at that thing that we've been avoiding, and we probably need to do it, as uncomfortable as that will be. And that action, that task, that conversation, that thing you've been avoiding is probably the exact thing that you are going to need to do in order to catapult whatever it is to the next level, whether it be business, whether it be your health, whether it be relationships. Sometimes we have to lean into these hard things that we've been avoiding, but it's never ever that simple, right? Because what a lot of us will do, myself included, and I've noticed this as a pattern of behavior in a lot of people's lives, again in mine as well, is that we'll sit in the pain of not dealing with that thing or avoiding that thing, because the pain of being in that avoidance setting doesn't outweigh our perceived level of pain in actually taking that action. So we need to look at, why are we avoiding it? What is the reason that we are scared to take action on this, or we are hesitant to take action on this? And for a lot of people, it can be scared of being wrong. It can be we are scared of the perceived consequence that is going to come from that particular action, conversation, task, or whatever it is. And if we break down that particular element, I don't think that there's ever been a time in my life where I haven't dramatized, if that's a word, the potential consequences of taking an action, or the potential consequences around, doing something. And what I mean by that is, if we're looking at something that we need to do, and it might be responding to an email, right? And you get an email come through in a work setting, in a professional setting, or even in a personal setting, and you get it, and it creates this response. We start to get scared about what's going to come of this particular interaction. Maybe you've got to respond to it in a really hard up way, like you've got to really be direct, and you've potentially got to tell the person something that you think they don't want to hear. And what we do is we create this scenario in our mind of what's going to happen when we have this conversation or when we respond to that person. And generally, the scenario that we've created in our heads is far worse than what will actually happen when we do it. And what that causes us to do is it creates fear around this particular action that we've got to take. It may be something of allocating more time for your health, or putting more time into training, or whatever the case might be. Well, the scenario that can go through a lot of dads' heads is, well, I'm going to have to take time from work, and then my boss is going to be angry with me. I'm going to have to take away time from the kids, and the kids are going to be angry with me, or my wife's going to be angry because I'm not able to do this. And we create these scenarios in our head without actually taking any action on it. And the longer that we don't take action on that thing we've been avoiding, the worse we actually tend to make those made up scenarios in our head. And what I've found, and what a lot of people that I've talked to have found, is when we actually have that conversation, we take that action, we respond to that email or whatever it is that we've been avoiding doing, we actually find out that the thing on the other side is not actually as bad as what we've made it out to be. So if you're only avoiding it because you're scared of a potential consequence, one thing that you need to look at is, what's the consequence going to be if I don't take this action? And the thing is, for a lot of the time, the longer we put things off for, the worse the actual consequence can get. The more angry people can become, the more unfit you can become, the worse your health can get. If it's a health thing that you're looking to try and get into, the longer you put it off for and the more you avoid it, the worse these situations can get. So if you're avoiding something because you're scared of a consequence that you don't 100% know is going to happen, that's not really a reason to be avoiding it. The other thing is, when we get scared of doing something, it can be our ego. It can be that we're afraid of being wrong. And I guess that is tied up in the last point about scared of the consequence. Being wrong is a potential consequence. But again, if that's the case, sometimes in order to grow, we need to dissolve our ego a little bit and be prepared to take a hit and be wrong on things and learn from those things and grow from those things. And in order to get to that next level as a human being within our health, within our professional life, within our relationships. And if we keep avoiding that, then because we're scared of being wrong, because we're scared of our ego getting bruised, we're never going to cross that threshold or cross that barrier into that next level. And again, most people wait far too long, and as an end result, the thing that they are avoiding and the potential scenario that they are avoiding can actually accumulate to a point where it does become a bigger thing than it needs to be. And that's why sometimes we just need to lean into that thing that we've been avoiding. Because the longer we avoid it for, the worse the potential outcome can become. And I think we need to be able to really remove ourselves from this situation. And I've spoke about it on the podcast before, and I've spoke about it in my life, and it is such a hard thing to do. I'm not dismissing how hard it is for someone to be objective in their own life. And that is why I see a lot of value in coaching as something that you get somebody with an outside perspective to give you advice on the actions that you need to be taking. And same with this thing, if there's something that you've been avoiding, getting an outside perspective and getting somebody who is removed from the situation to give you their perspective on it can be such a powerful thing that can help propel you into that next level or propel you to take some action and sometimes dispel the fear of these made up consequences that we've put in our head. But being objective can be a superpower for a lot of people. And understanding why, like, is the fear I have around this and is the avoidance I have around this legitimate or not? Because sometimes there can be things we're avoiding because there is a legitimate reason why we're not doing it. And I'm not saying everything you're not doing you need to go and do it. We need to understand that there are things that we don't do that we need to continue to not do. It's the old saying where if you used to do something wrong as a kid, and a throwaway line that my parents would use would be, if person XYZ jumped off a cliff, would you do it? Would you follow them off? And it's like, well, we'd avoid, not that, hopefully we don't, hope nobody jumps off a cliff, but that's not the point. Like, if somebody's doing that is something that is absolutely dangerous to their health, we're obviously going to avoid that, and we're not going to do that action because, like, there is a legitimate threat to our overall health and well-being. So the first thing we need to look at, like, if there's something we're avoiding, is my fear around doing this and my avoidance of taking this action, is it legitimate or not? Because if it's legitimate, and this is where the nuance comes and being objective comes in, is the legitimacy of it something that is actually going to be 100% detrimental to my overall health and well-being? Or is the detriment to my health and well-being something that I've made up? And that's where we need to be objective about it. A saying that I love, and I've done a podcast around that saying, is you can't read the instructions inside the box. You need to remove yourself from that and understand it as a whole to know, is this thing I'm avoiding and this fear that I've created around it legitimate or not? Am I scared of being wrong? Do I want to, and then when you go and get advice, you have to go into, if you're going to get advice around the situation, you have to be prepared to actually take on that advice, take on that coaching. Because all too often, and I've seen it over the last 15 years, time and time again, people reach out for advice and they don't actually want a solution. They just want their ideas to be reinforced. They just want to be right. They don't actually want you to tell them what to do. All they're doing and all they're coming to you is they just want you to reinforce. And this whole topic is really based around that. Because if there's something you have been avoiding and then you go to somebody to give you their opinion on it, and they give you an opinion that doesn't feel comfortable to you, you have to understand that maybe that person is right, and maybe I need to lean into what they're telling me to do, as much as it's not what I would have thought I could do, because that's going to help me grow and that's going to help me get to where I want to be. And what a lot of people will do is they will hear a piece of advice from somebody which is targeted to them in their own particular set of circumstances, and they will dismiss that because it's not conducive with what they thought it needed to be for them. When they've stepped into that interaction, they're not open to the coaching, they're not open to the advice. All they're looking for is confirmation that what they are doing is the right thing when it actually isn't. And so to loop back to the overall point of the podcast and the overall reminder, they're avoiding something that they want to do because they don't want to be wrong. Their ego's at a place where they're not ready for it to be broken down a little bit. They've potentially created a set of consequences in their mind which may not actually manifest if they take that action and they lean into the thing that they're avoiding, and as a result they stay stuck. They don't get anywhere. They're left in this limbo state where they know there's an action that they need to take, and they've created so many different scenarios and circumstances in their mind, they just don't take any action, and as a result they don't get anywhere. So, to finish off, that thing that you've been avoiding, you probably need to look at going and doing that. And the process I would undertake to maybe lessen the blow on what you need to do is the first thing you need to look at is is it legitimate or not? Is the fear that I've created around taking this action, having this conversation, a legitimate fear, or is it just something a scenario that I have created? And then from there, if it's not legitimate, start taking some action to change it. And that action is going to be uncomfortable. You are going to feel out of place while you're doing it, but that's part of growth. That's part of growth as a man, as a human being. And for all intents and purposes, if we want to continue to grow and we want to continue to be the best dads, husbands, and fathers that we can be, we need to lean into these uncomfortable situations consistently in order to push our boundaries so that we can show our children that it's okay to be uncomfortable and it's okay to suck at things, because that's how you grow and that's how you continue to be the best version of yourself you can be. So that's it for this week. I appreciate your time. I spoke about coaching briefly on there. If you need some help getting yourself outside of the box and you need somebody's objective perspective on maybe a situation that you feel you're struggling with, you can book in a time below. There is a link in the show notes where you can book in a free 30-minute call with myself, and we can go through a few things to hopefully help you unpack and give you some perspective on that you may not be able to gain for yourself. So book in that time. Let's have a chat. But other than that, if you think you've got a handle on it yourself, amazing, fantastic. Go have at it. Lean into that thing you've been avoiding. Grow. Be amazing. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.